Hello, this is Bonnie Hedrick, and this week we'll be looking at two topics relevant to assisting consumers as they navigate their recovery pathway. The topics are creating a Wellness Recovery Action Plan, or WRAP, W-R-A-P, and understanding advanced directives. First, though, I want to talk to you about self-care and wellness because that topic is relevant to both you and your consumer. It is important for you to remain healthy and strong so that you can help them. To understand more fully why self-care is so important, please download and read Morbidity and Mortality in People with Serious Mental Illness. You will learn why persons with serious mental health disorders are at higher risk for developing diseases and disabilities than the general population. Comparable to the way a fibrous root system forms to stabilize a tree, our earliest life experiences, both good and bad, accumulate over time. They converge and collide like a perfect storm to create our capacity for social, emotional, cognitive, and physical well-being, however functional or dysfunctional. This week you will be watching a video about adversity in childhood by Dr. Nadine Burke Harris. It will explain that our foundation for health began when we were very young. Our parents and other caregivers made decisions about what we ate, how and where we slept, when we saw a doctor, the environment in which we lived, how we accessed dental and preventive health services like immunizations. Their decisions were influenced by factors that we call social determinants of health, which we'll discuss in more detail later in this presentation. According to the World Health Organization, health is defined as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. That means health in mind, body, and spirit. Our state of health is on a continuum, with optimal health and well-being in mind, body, and spirit on one end of the continuum, and disability and premature death on the other end. As mentioned, our early caregivers laid the foundation for our health and well-being, but it is up to us when we become of age to make the decisions to remain on the healthy side of that equation. The decisions our parents made for us were based on what is called social determinants of health. As the diagram shows, our health can be influenced by what is in our environment, including the social context, what is in our genetic makeup or our DNA, and the early choices that were made for us by our parents, but also the everyday choices we make for ourselves. To further describe the social determinants of health, you can see in this slide that many things influenced our caregivers' choices, and they also influence the choices we make every day. These things include accessibility and availability of healthcare resources. Those services might be there, but we can't access them because we don't have the transportation. The same concept applies to social welfare resources, things like food and shelter and clothing. Our health is also determined or influenced by our home environment, the one that we grew up in and the one we live in. Such things as cleanliness, abuse and neglect, or other kinds of adversity. The presence of secondhand smoke. Our decisions are also influenced by the culture in our families and that of our community. This includes religious and cultural practices and norms. Our health decisions are also influenced by the policies and practices for population health in our community, local ordinances, state legislation, federal laws. Can you remember when no one wore a seatbelt or smoke was everywhere in public restaurants? It wasn't until research showed that both of those things had a deleterious effect on our health that those laws were put into place. But finally, we cannot overlook the importance of employment and economic stability. because financial means increases access to a lot of things, including housing, nutritious food, and safety. The impact of early life experiences has also been researched in the field of genetics. The new field is called epigenetics. It is evolving, but research to date supports the importance of the environment for determining how our genes are expressed. Research supports that what we eat, how we sleep, the amount of exercise we get, our stress level, and everything else in our environment has the potential to turn on genes or off genes over time. Therefore, it is the link between nature, our DNA, and nurture, our environment, that makes us all unique, with physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual elements intricately intertwined. Staying healthy requires preventive activities such as immunizations, eating a well-balanced diet, getting recommended levels of exercise and sleep. It also means reducing stress levels. When disease occurs, early and effective evidence-based treatment can minimize the disease's impact on our well-being. Fortunately, we were born to survive with lots of mechanisms to keep us safe and healthy, like a skull to protect our brain, a backbone to protect our vital organs that make our bodies work, and a mechanism in our blood to stop bleeding, and so much more. This is important because multiple studies have shown that substance use and severe mental health disorders increase the risk of poor health, disability, and premature death. This is an alarming slide that shows the difference in a variety of health conditions among persons with severe mental illness and those without it. The red columns represents those that with mental health disorders, whereas the white column represents those without it. And you can see that for every illness, the prevalence of disease and disability is much higher in persons with serious mental health disorders. For this reason, we need to help our consumers adopt healthier lifestyles to minimize their risk for these diseases. Why do persons with mental health disorders have higher morbidity and mortality from a variety of these diseases? That's a good question. On this slide and the next, you'll see that there are many contributing factors. The first, and one which is very modifiable, is just a higher rate of smoking, alcohol consumption, poor nutrition, and obesity among that population. And those are things that we can work on as peer support specialists. Persons with serious mental health disorders also have increased vulnerability due to their higher rates of homelessness, trauma in early childhood, unemployment, poverty, incarceration, and social isolation. Just the nature of the mental health disorders, such as impaired reality testing, disorganized thought processes, and impaired communication skills, can also prevent early intervention and treatment. Those same symptoms can mask symptoms of medical or somatic illnesses as well. Psychotropic medications can mask symptoms of medical illnesses. They can also contribute to the symptoms of medical illness and cause metabolic syndrome. When more than one psychotropic medication is used, sometimes administered by different psychiatrists, it further complicates the issue. Lack of access to health care and lack of coordination between mental health and general health providers is a major contributing factor to higher morbidity and mortality among this population. This slide illustrates that persons with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder are more likely to be obese, and more than half of them smoke. These are modifiable risk factors for diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and heart disease. This slide illustrates the increased risk for heart disease due to smoking. Likewise, this slide shows the increased risk for diabetes. Mental health and substance use disorders affect people from all walks of life and all age groups. These illnesses are common, recurrent, and often serious, but they are treatable, and many people do recover. Many mental health disorders involve changes in thinking, mood, and/or behavior. These disorders can affect how we relate to others and make choices. Reaching a level that can be formally diagnosed often depends on a reduction in a person's ability to function as a result of the disorder. Often substance use and mental disorder intersect, resulting in what is known as a dual diagnosis or co-occurring disorder. For recovery to be successful, both should be treated simultaneously. Many of these risk factors are behavior-related and therefore preventable. If you change the behaviors related to eating, smoking, exercising, etc., one can reduce the risk of illness. Smoking cessation may be the modifiable risk factor intervention that is likely to have the greatest impact on decreasing mortality. It has been linked to an increase in heart disease, lung disease, and cancer. You can also prevent diabetes. The amount of glucose or sugar in your blood determines a diagnosis of diabetes. A level of 6.5 on an A1C, the blood test, to determine diabetes is considered the edge of the cliff or a diagnosis of diabetes. You don't want to go over it because you can't go back. Once you are diagnosed with diabetes, you remain a diabetic for the rest of your life. This slide provides some things you can do to prevent falling over that cliff. Much like diabetes or other chronic diseases, substance use disorder doesn't happen quickly. There is a progression that leads to the diagnosis. In regard to alcohol and other drug use, heavy use leads to dependence, which leads to addiction. Another contributor to health and well-being is our own innate or built-in stress response. When we are faced with a threat, whether it's a physical threat or an emotional threat, our body reacts. Energy is created. Epinephrine, also known as adrenaline, gets into our bloodstream. As epinephrine circulates through the body, it causes our heart to beat faster, pumping blood to the areas needed to respond, and it sends extra oxygen to the brain to increase alertness. Epinephrine also causes a release of blood sugar or glucose and fats from temporary storage in our body to supply energy to all parts of our body. This process happens automatically, enabling a quick response if needed. A second process happens to keep the stress response going if the threat is still there. Often called the gas pedal, this hormonal release causes the release of cortisol, which enables humans to run or fight as much and as long as necessary to survive. When the threat passes, cortisol levels return to normal. The brakes are put on. But sometimes cortisol level remains high and the brakes are not applied. When the brake pedals are never applied, people stay in a prolonged state of heightened stress response. It increases the likelihood of developing anxiety, depression, digestive problems, headaches, heart disease, sleep problems, weight gain, and memory and concentration impairment. I feel like this has been a lot of statistics and information about mortality and morbidity, death and disability for persons with mental health disorders. It is serious, but there are things we can do with our clients to help them improve their state of health. There are things we can do to improve our own state of health. One of the modules of study this week is about developing a RAP plan with your clients. This is where we can build in activities that will address these modifiable risk factors. There are wellness tips that help anyone, especially for those in recovery. Practicing deep breathing and meditation are effective ways to reduce stress and overeating. 8 hours of sleep in a 24-hour period also reduces stress by reducing fatigue. Perhaps the most important, though, is seeking help if you need it. You must remain as healthy as possible to maintain your own recovery and help others begin and continue their pathways. We're here to help. Bonnie Hedrick and Chris Hamilton if you need us.